My wife's best friend called me and said, she's at the party with her boss, and for a moment, everything inside me froze. That sentence echoed in my ears like a siren announcing an imminent fire. It was Friday night, I was at home, with my shirt still half open from the day's work, preparing a simple surprise, but full of meaning. She had said she would have a late meeting at the office, something about a new project, a new goal, words that now, suddenly, sounded like coldly rehearsed excuses. I hesitated. I took a deep breath. Reason tried to stop me, but the instinct of a betrayed man spoke louder. I took the keys, got in the car and went to the address he gave me. An informal corporate party, she said, but when I got there, I realized that none of it was informal, at least not in terms of what they were doing. Parked in front of the place, I watched for a few minutes before entering. There was no reason to act on impulse, I just wanted to confirm. But the truth is, I already knew. Something in the tone of the call, in her friend's nervousness, in the way she hesitated before telling me, something there said it all. I entered. The loud sound drowned out my thoughts, but my eyes searched for one thing, her face. And then I saw it. In the middle of the dance floor, amidst the music, laughter and lights, she was there, dancing with him as if she was forgetting everything she had built alongside me. His hand on her waist, her eyes laughing with her lips parted. That laugh, as if I had never existed. The anger that welled up wasn't explosive, it was cold, meticulous. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't go to her. I just stood there, watching. A stranger in history itself. An extra in the plot that, until then, I thought was the protagonist. I returned to the car in silence. I spent the weekend in a trance, like someone watching their own life fall apart in slow motion. On Monday, I filed for divorce. There was no discussion. She cried, tried to justify herself, lied, asked for forgiveness, fell to her knees saying it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that it was just curiosity. But a mistake doesn't last for weeks. A mistake doesn't send messages late at night, doesn't invent fictitious meetings. A mistake doesn't pretend to sleep next to you after having been in another bed. And if it was all just curiosity, then I would rather be the answer she never discovered. The divorce went more smoothly than I imagined. Because I was already destroyed inside and she had just started to fall. I followed with dignity. I picked up the pieces, pulled myself together, and planned the most epic comeback of my life. If she cheated on me with her boss, that's great, he also had a wife. And she was the kind of woman who didn't swallow lies. All it took was a conversation, some prints, and a casual dinner. All it took was showing the truth to the right person and letting social justice do its work. The following week, the two were visible in the company's corridors. Photos, conversations, audios. His wife, a woman of poise and pride, took care of the rest. She was the one who disclosed everything to her coworkers, the compliance department, and even her superiors. He lost the promotion he sought so much, and she, my ex, was removed for internal conduct investigation. Within weeks, both were out of the company. And the saddest thing, or perhaps the fairest thing, is that he didn't even want a serious relationship with her. It was just another adventure to fill the ego void. She tried to go back. She came to me, wrote me letters, sent me audio recordings crying, saying that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I heard everything, every word. But I didn't respond. Until one day, I ran into her by chance, in a cafe. She was haggard, visibly thinner, her eyes were tired and her voice was shaking. She said she was sorry, that she had learned her lesson, that she needed one more chance. Smile. I said that the problem was never that she cheated on me, but that she was sure that I would agree to come back. And I left, leaving only the sound of the door closing behind me. Months later, when I was already rebuilding my life, I found love again. A serene, respectful love. Someone who didn't fall in love with the image I showed the world, but with who I was on difficult days. A love that arrived when I no longer believed. And it was there that I realized that, sometimes, the betrayal that destroys is the same one that sets you free. Because if I hadn't gone to that party that night, maybe I would still be living next to someone who pretended to love me. Maybe he still believed in excuses, in absences, in cold kisses. Maybe he was still the idiot who prepared romantic dinners while she picked out lingerie for another man. But the truth, however painful it may be, is liberating. And my freedom began there, in that moment of pain, when I saw that the woman who promised to love me forever was dancing like an enchanted teenager in the arms of another. But what she never imagined was that behind that silent and betrayed man, there was someone ready to resurface. And that's exactly what I did. I have risen. Only better. Stronger. Lighter. And more loved. Now, if everything seems to have had a fair end, why is it that, even after so much time, even today, she appears in places where she knows I will be? Why does she refuse to move on, even though she was the one who destroyed everything? What exactly did she lose in that story, besides me? That answer, you will find out. But it won't be easy to digest. Because the true weight of regret only begins when the consequence becomes destiny. And her destiny is far from what she planned. Welcome to the channel. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictitious, but they carry profound truths. Our purpose is clear, to show how betrayal corrodes, destroys and forever marks the lives of those who suffer it, and those who commit it. Get ready to dive into a story intense, realistic and unforgettable. Fasten your seatbelts, because what you're about to hear now will leave you breathless. Jonathan has always been a man with a calm temperament, one of those who observe more than he speaks, who listens to the world before passing any judgment. He worked as a project manager at a technology company that was growing quietly in the market, and he was proud of the life he had built with effort and planning. He was not a man of grandiose gestures, but he knew how to love in the details, in the coffee left on his bedside table on Saturday mornings, in the affectionate notes stuck on the refrigerator door, in the hands that he held firmly when the world outside became too unstable. For him, love was routine, it was permanence, it was a daily choice. It was looking at Lauren, his wife of almost 7 years, and feeling that, despite the ups and downs, she was still the woman he would choose to weather any storm for. Lauren, on the other hand, has always been more volatile. Intelligent, expressive, a woman with presence. His way of speaking involved everyone around him, and his smile, wide, spontaneous, seemed capable of calming the most heated emotions. He worked in the marketing sector of the same company where Jonathan was a manager, although in different departments. She was known for her bold ideas and her ability to lead presentations with a confidence that bordered on the magnetic. He had clear ambitions, plans that he drew up with discipline, goals that he placed on visual boards on the wall of his home office. She also had an eye for the aesthetic details of life. She liked fresh flowers in the living room, kept a playlist for every mood, photographed meals as if they were art. To their friends, the couple was the perfect example of modern harmony, two successful professionals, with a young daughter and a house with minimalist architecture that looked like something out of a magazine. Their home was a reflection of what they wanted to project to the world, balanced, welcoming, full of small delicacies that showed care. In the living room, a beige linen sofa matched the light palette of the walls, while books on art, design and psychology shared space with educational toys from her daughter, Emily, just 4 years old. The kitchen was Jonathan's favorite place. She liked to cook on Sundays, while Lauren turned on some quiet music and drew next to her daughter at the dinner table. It was in these simple moments, of sense and shy laughter, that Jonathan felt that everything made sense, that the effort of keeping his routine in balance was worth it. I was convinced that this was what family was, continuous presence and subtle gestures. Emily was the center of that house. Since he was born, he has brought with him a new layer of meaning to the couple's lives. Lauren dedicated herself to motherhood with an unexpected lightness, even though she kept her career active. Jonathan, in turn, seemed born to be a father. I woke up at dawn without complaining, I made a point of participating in each phase, each vaccine, each school presentation. They combined very well in this aspect. They shared tasks, decisions and anxieties. Emily grew up surrounded by love, in a home where the words, "you matter," were said often. Maybe that's why the two of them, despite the demands of work and the natural divergences of a relationship, maintained the appearance of unshakable solidity. Their routine was marked by silent complicity. It wasn't necessary to say much to understand each other. They had a habit of meeting up for lunch at least once a week, even if their commitments were intense. On these occasions, they talked about personal projects, vacation plans, and Emily's small victories. They laughed, they listened to each other. Jonathan looked at Lauren with that same glow from the first months of their relationship, even though her features were no longer exactly the same. For him, time had only added layers of beauty and complexity. He still admired her, and perhaps, without realizing it, still placed Lauren on a pedestal that she no longer felt like occupying. In recent months, some changes have started to happen, but in such a subtle way that they would be easily ignored by anyone on the outside, or even by anyone who was too inside the story. Lauren began to dedicate herself more intensely to company events. As the leader of a young and dynamic team, I was frequently asked for external presentations, client meetings and corporate lunches. Jonathan understood. He was never the controlling type, and supported his ambitions. When she returned home later, he had already fed Emily, told her stories, put her to bed, and had dinner ready. She thanked him with a hasty kiss and went upstairs to take a shower, saying she was exhausted. He smiled. I knew that the work could be exhausting, and I never questioned too much. Deep down, I liked being her safe haven. There were nights, however, when the silence between the two became thicker. Jonathan began to notice absences that weren't exactly physical. Small delays in responding to messages, a slight distance in the eyes during conversations, the type of distraction that cannot be explained by tiredness. But he refused to entertain suspicions. I preferred to believe it was just a phase. All couples go through phases. The pressure of work, raising a small child, one's own fears, all of this could justify what he felt. So he didn't speak. He didn't ask. He continued to be kind, helpful, present. She continued to buy flowers on Fridays and leave coffee in bed on Sundays. Lauren, in turn, sank more and more into an uneasiness that even she didn't know how to properly name. Sometimes he looked in the mirror and wondered when exactly he stopped feeling the same enthusiasm. He liked Jonathan, he was sure of that. I respected him, admired the man he was, the father he had become. But there was something inside her, a latent restlessness, a desire for newness, to feel alive again, like the college years when everything seemed possible. He started spending more time at the company, accepting invitations to happy hours even when he had already promised to return early. He made up little excuses, without any bad intentions, just with the aim of not worrying Jonathan. You would think he wouldn't understand. That maybe it was just a phase too, and that it would pass. At work, rapprochement with the new regional director emerged naturally. Initially, professional exchanges, praise for her ideas, conversations about goals and results. Over time, the meetings became more frequent, the smiles longer, the looks longer. Lauren felt seen, heard, intellectually provoked. It was as if she was awakening to a version of herself that she hadn't accessed in a long time. There was no guilt, yet. Just a feeling of rediscovery. Jonathan, at home, noticed the stronger perfumes, the laughter on his cell phone before bed, but he continued to trust. I attributed everything to the intense professional phase. He told himself that everything would soon fall into place. The weekends still had their beauty. Family outings, movies on the couch, long breakfasts. Moments that felt real, authentic. And maybe they were. Lauren didn't feign affection, she didn't play roles. But inside her, two worlds began to form. That of stability and affection with Jonathan, and that of excitement and possibility with someone who appeared as something new. She didn't want to choose. I wanted to feel. I wanted to understand. Jonathan, in turn, started writing a book in his spare time. He had always been passionate about literature, but he had put that dream aside with the birth of Emily and the heavy work routine. Now, I was slowly returning to this habit, writing about love, choices and new beginnings. He didn't know those words would prepare him for a new version of himself. A version that I was still unaware of. Everything seemed calm, normal, almost stable. Like the surface of a lake before the storm. And the storm was already forming on the horizon. Silent. Unpredictable. Fatal. Jonathan began to notice the first signs of the transformation in almost invisible details. The absence of a kiss on the forehead when leaving for work, the delay in responding to simple messages, such as, "How are you?" or "How was the presentation?" Previously spontaneous conversations became objective summaries of the day. Lauren always seemed tired, or always busy, and although they still slept in the same bed, the distance between their bodies was a silent line drawn by something he couldn't name. And maybe that's why it took so long to react. I wanted to believe that marriage was just facing a period of adjustment. That Lauren was overwhelmed, that everything would get back on track when her schedule lightened up, or when a family vacation happened. If life were an equation, he still added it with hope, while she already shared it with doubts that grew subtly, but continuously. At work, Lauren flourished in another direction. Her relationship with Thomas, the new regional director, began to go beyond the limits of professional cordiality without her clearly realizing it. The exchange of ideas turned into mutual admiration, the compliments that previously seemed like just encouragement were now accompanied by subtle touches on the arm, laughter that took too long, invitations to lunches where the topics went beyond campaign strategies. Thomas was knowledgeable, charming, charismatic. He knew how to talk to intelligent women without sounding sycophantic, he knew how to offer attention without seeming invasive. Lauren began allowing herself more time away from the office, justifying meetings that, while real, were conducted in settings that fostered intimacy. She, who had always been careful with her schedule, started to be late more frequently. Emily started asking what was taking Mom so long. Jonathan patiently responded that sometimes the work demands a little more. And smile. Because that was how he believed a relationship could be sustained, with patience, with understanding, with faith in the other. But absences left traces. A forgotten lipstick in your work bag, a change of perfume, an outfit purchased without explanation. Little things that, in isolation, mean nothing, but together they build a scene. Jonathan began to observe more. And the more I observed, the more I noticed the silences, the empty smiles, the growing disconnection. Lauren was still kind, she still kissed Emily on the forehead before bed, she still attended school meetings, but there was a missing sparkle in her eyes, as if part of her had already gone somewhere else. He didn't say anything. He continued to be the present husband, the zealous father, the man who prepared dinners on special nights even without commemorative dates. But in silence, an uneasiness began to take shape. Lauren, in turn, experienced an internal conflict that she could not resolve. I liked Jonathan, his stability, his kindness, his dedication. But what she felt for Thomas made her feel alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. It wasn't love, at least not yet. It was desire, it was admiration, it was the fascination with the forbidden. A game of veiled provocations that made her smile alone when looking at her cell phone. They started exchanging messages outside of working hours, conversations that were far from professional. A code was being established between them, their own language, as if they formed a parallel universe in which they could just be two free adults, without commitments, without guilt, without routines. One day, Thomas invited her to an exclusive company cocktail, an event reserved for a few guests, including directors and strategic partners. She hesitated to tell Jonathan. He just said that there would be a marketing celebration and that he needed to attend. Jonathan wished her a good event and stayed with Emily at home. He prepared his daughter's favorite dinner, they watched a children's movie and then he put her to bed. As he stroked Emily's hair, he thought about Lauren and how tired she probably was, how pressured he must be with goals, how he hadn't yet written the chapter in the book he promised himself that week. That night, Lauren wore a new dress, a burgundy shade that shaped her body with elegance. Thomas was waiting for her at the entrance to the event, smiling as if he already knew the outcome. The cocktail party was in a refined hotel, with ambient music and glasses of sparkling wine circulating discreetly. The conversations began formally, but soon the group dispersed. Before long, they were alone on a balcony, laughing at inside jokes, exchanging looks that said more than words. When Thomas touched his fingers to hers, Lauren didn't flinch. It wasn't an impulsive kiss. It was a choice. Slow. Consented. A kiss that started out light, but intensified with the certainty that that moment could no longer be avoided. She didn't come home that night. He sent a message to Jonathan saying that he would need to sleep in a hotel due to a problem with transportation and that he would explain better the next day. Jonathan read the message without responding. He looked at his cell phone screen for a few minutes. Something inside him silently broke. The next morning, Lauren got home before 7. He found Jonathan preparing coffee. He greeted her with a kiss on the forehead, looked into her eyes for a few seconds and smiled. She smiled back, trying to look natural, trying not to think about what she had done, trying to convince herself that it meant nothing more than a moment of escape. Emily ran to her mother with open arms and Lauren hugged her tightly. He wanted to convince himself that this was just a phase, that he could control it, that he would know when to stop. But the following weeks showed that she had already crossed a line that would not allow for easy returns. Meetings with Thomas became frequent. Discreet motels, hidden dinners, afternoons of long meetings. Lauren was torn between family commitments and secret desires. Jonathan, on the other hand, sank into deep silences. I no longer wrote with the same frequency, I no longer smiled spontaneously. I was attentive. But he didn't confront. Not yet. His pain was silent, but increasingly present. One day, while Lauren was in the shower, he picked up her cell phone which had vibrated. The notification on the screen left no doubt. There were no passwords. He no longer needed to imagine. He read the messages one by one, with frightening calm. The heart is racing, but the face is serene. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Nothing broke. He just took a deep breath, put his cell phone away and went for a walk. In the following days, he began to act as if nothing had happened. But inside, every gesture was calculated. It was processing. Thinking. Planning. Lauren didn't understand. He believed he could still keep everything under control. Jonathan was, after all, the calm man. The husband who understands. The father who supports. Except, for the first time, she couldn't look into his eyes for long. She felt watched. Suspicious. And maybe it was just guilt. Or maybe it was the first sign that something in her was also beginning to fall apart. The peak came on a Friday. Lauren had gone out with Thomas once again, this time to a product launch party. Same excuse as always. But that night, something was different. An unknown number called Jonathan. It was Clara, Lauren's best friend. The voice on the other end was hesitant, as if it carried the weight of something it no longer wanted to bear. He just said, "She's at the party with her boss." And hung up. Jonathan remained looking at the phone for a few seconds, in silence. He got up, took the car keys, put on his jacket and left. When he arrived at the scene, he parked across the street and watched. The illuminated facade, well-dressed people coming and going. He walked slowly to the entrance. The atmosphere was sophisticated, full of music, smiles, toasts. He searched among the faces until his eyes stopped on the image that confirmed everything. She, beside him, dancing as if the whole world had disappeared. His hand on her waist, his lips too close, his body pressed together. Jonathan didn't move. There was no scandal. Just looked. And there, standing there, he felt something die inside him. He left before she saw him. He got back in the car, started the engine, and instead of going home, he drove aimlessly for hours. The next morning, Lauren woke up next to Thomas. He took out his cell phone and found only a message from Jonathan: "Make sure you're not late for coffee with Emily." No judgment. No charges. But there was something about it that made his breath hitch for a second. I felt like I had crossed an invisible line and that now there was no way back. She just didn't imagine what would come next. Not even what he already knew. Nor what had already begun to happen in silence. In the days following the discovery, Jonathan began to live in a state of almost supernatural lucidity. Everything was seen with a clarity that hadn't existed before, as if betrayal had ripped a blindfold from his eyes. He remained calm, meticulous, never allowing Lauren to realize what he already knew. The routine continued. Morning still started with coffee on the table and Emily running around the room with her drawings, but inside him, something new and corrosive was growing: the hunger for justice. Not that impulsive and destructive revenge, but a justice that would give him back the dignity that they had tried to steal from him. And it was in this state of wounded rationality that Jonathan began to draw up his plan. He knew that exploding was not an option. He didn't want to simply expose Lauren. He wanted her to feel the weight of her own choices with the same intensity that he felt the cold blade of betrayal piercing his chest. It started with something simple: emotional detachment. Short answers, calculated looks, formal smiles. Lauren started to notice. I tried to start conversations, revive old rituals, schedule small family programs. Jonathan accepted everything with kindness, but something in his eyes was different. She didn't know if it was coldness, disappointment, or just tiredness. But it was different. One night, after Emily fell asleep, she sat next to him on the couch, touched his arm, and asked if everything was okay. He smiled, stared at her for a few seconds and said he was just reflective. She nodded and forced a smile, but she couldn't hide her discomfort. His silence made her uneasy, as if there was something hovering between them that she didn't yet understand. What Lauren didn't imagine was that Jonathan had gone deeper. After confirming the betrayal, he looked for Thomas's wife. Getting in touch was easy. A quick search on the company's intranet revealed the surname, and in a few clicks he found social media. He didn't approach her right away. He studied his steps, understood his routine, and only then sent a short, direct, but careful message. "I would like to talk to you about something that may be affecting your family the same way it has affected mine." The answer came the next day. A meeting was arranged in a discreet cafe, and when they looked at each other for the first time, it wasn't necessary to say much. Her gaze conveyed the same silent pain, the same contained fury. They talked for 2 hours. Jonathan showed the messages, the photos, the coinciding times. She was shocked, but not surprised. Intuited. And now he confirmed it. From then on, they built a silent alliance. She knew the behind the scenes of the company. He had solid proof. They discovered that meetings between Lauren and Thomas were not limited to motels or restaurants. On at least 3 occasions, the two had used company funds to cover personal expenses, disguised as strategic meetings. Dinners paid for with a corporate card, hotel reservations booked as accommodation for clients, hours recorded on spreadsheets that did not match reality. What was just marital betrayal suddenly became an internal fraud. And that changed everything. With the help of Thomas's wife, Jonathan organized a complete dossier and sent it anonymously to the company's compliance department. The following days were a silent spectacle of tension. Internal investigators began roaming the hallways, extraordinary meetings were called, and the atmosphere in the workplace changed abruptly. Lauren noticed the movement, but thought it was something corporate, a new audit. Thomas, on the other hand, began to show uneasiness. He stayed away from lighter conversations, avoided meetings outside the office, until one day, he was called to a confidential meeting with the legal department. That afternoon, he did not return to his room. Lauren tried to contact her but received no response. The next day, he didn't show up. Not in the other. No official announcement, just the rumor that he had been temporarily removed. And then, the inevitable. A notification was delivered to Lauren's desk. She should also report to the compliance department for clarification. He entered the room with his heart racing. She didn't know what it was about, but the formal tone of the summons put her on alert. As she sat down in front of the two company representatives, she listened attentively as they presented her with a series of inconsistencies found in reports signed by her. They asked about lunches, reservations, justifications. Lauren tried to maintain her composure, saying she didn't remember all the details and would need to review the documents. But deep down, I knew. She felt her throat dry and a metallic taste rise to her mouth. After the meeting, he left the company without knowing if he would return. He called Jonathan, trying to hide his nervousness. He answered with a calm voice. She just said that she was already preparing dinner and that Emily was asking for her. When he got home, he found everything in place, the table set, his daughter playing with colored pencils, the soft background music. Jonathan greeted her with a kiss on the cheek and asked her how her day had been. She hesitated, said everything was fine. He just nodded and continued cutting vegetables. That night, while Emily was sleeping, Lauren collapsed. He sat down on the bed and said he needed to talk. Jonathan approached slowly. She looked at him and asked, her voice breaking, if he still loved her. He remained silent for a few seconds and replied that the issue was not love, but respect. She started to cry. He confessed the betrayal in a trembling voice, without details, just with the guilt dripping through the words. She said she felt lost, that she didn't know why she had let things get to that point, that she didn't want to lose her family. Jonathan listened to everything in silence. When she finished, he took a deep breath, stood up, opened his desk drawer and took out a folder. He handed it to her. Lauren took it, confused. When he opened it, he saw copies of messages, receipts, and doctored reports. His face lost color. He looked at him, trying to understand what it all meant. It was then that he revealed it. He said it wasn't just betrayal that was at stake, but something bigger. That the truth wasn't just about their marriage, but about their character. That she not only broke her marital vows, but tarnished her own professional reputation. Lauren tried to defend herself, saying she wasn't responsible for the spreadsheets, that she had trusted Thomas. Jonathan responded firmly, but without raising his voice. He said she chose to participate, she chose to lie, she chose to live two lives. And now, the consequences had arrived. She asked if he had handed over the documents. He didn't respond directly. I just said that everything that was there was real, and that those responsible would be confronted with the truth, sooner or later. Lauren burst into tears. He felt the world collapsing beneath his feet. He had lost control of his own narrative. She didn't know who had reported her, she didn't know how the documents had gotten to the company. But deep down, I already suspected. Days later, he received the official notice of his leave for an indefinite period. The company would conduct a formal investigation. Gossip spread quickly. Colleagues began to avoid her, messages were ignored, and her name became a whisper in the hallways. Jonathan, on the other hand, continued with the routine. I took care of Emily, kept the house in order, wrote. His serenity was disconcerting. One night, Lauren found him sitting on the porch, looking up at the sky. She sat next to him, in silence. After a few minutes, he asked if there was still a chance. He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he spoke with his soul exposed. He said he didn't know if there was a return, because everything between them was hurt. It wasn't just love, it was trust, admiration, the foundation on which they had built everything. Lauren started crying, saying she would do anything to get her family back. But Jonathan only said that it was too late for promises now. That he had already learned to live without her. That his greatest lesson had been discovering that pain doesn't destroy, it transforms. And as she wallowed in guilt and regret, he just got up, kissed Emily goodnight, and closed the door softly. On the other side, Lauren remained sitting, staring into the dark. I still didn't know who had planted the ruin. But soon, he would find out. And I wasn't prepared for the truth that was about to emerge. At the end of that same week, Lauren had the confirmation she feared, a formal letter from the company, signed by the legal department, announcing her dismissal due to misconduct and misuse of corporate resources. The text was cold, direct, and made it clear that the evidence had been irrefutable. When she finished reading, she sat on the sofa in the living room, with her eyes lost on the wall, feeling the pressure in her chest intensify as if something inside her was slowly sinking. Emily played in her room, oblivious to the adult world crumbling around her. The house, once full of energy and movement, now felt like a silent sanctuary of all that was lost. Lauren tried to rationalize, but there were no more excuses. The world she knew, that she built, that she controlled, had vanished like sand between her fingers. He got up aimlessly, opened the door to his daughter's room, watched her for a few seconds, then closed it and went to the couple's room, now filled with a concrete absence. He sat on the edge of the bed, facing the closet where Jonathan's clothes still were. Those shirts folded with precision, the light perfume permeating the collars. He touched one of them, feeling the painful sting of something he couldn't name. And it was at that exact moment, without knowing why, that she decided to confront him. At the end of the afternoon, he arrived home with Emily in his arms, the two of them laughing about something they had experienced in the park. Jonathan seemed light, calm, as if the recent days had been nothing more than a breeze, not a hurricane. Lauren was waiting for him sitting at the kitchen table, with her eyes red, her face exhausted. He noticed right away. He asked Emily to go play in the room and then approached her, placing the keys on the table. She didn't wait for him to speak. He stood up and, in a low but firm voice, asked what he had done. Jonathan raised his eyebrows slightly, surprised by the approach, and then just sat down, crossing his arms, keeping his gaze fixed on hers. She insisted, with teary eyes, saying that she knew it wasn't just a coincidence, that someone had gathered all that evidence, that someone had articulated everything for the company to discover. And he finally responded with a serenity that cut through more than any scream. He said he didn't move a finger more than he needed to. That the truth, when it is solid, does not need a spectacle. And that if she had fallen, it was not because he pushed her, but because she had dug herself into her own collapse. Lauren exploded. She said he was cold, calculating, that he had let everything fall apart without even trying to fight for them. Jonathan stood up slowly, approached her with a firm gaze and replied, without hesitation, that he would fight with everything if there was something true worth fighting for. But he could no longer fight against lies, against excuses disguised as regret, against a version of the woman he shared years with that no longer existed. He wasn't cold. I was just awake. And that sometimes, loving someone meant letting them go, especially when that person insisted on losing themselves. That night, they slept in absolute silence. The weight in the air was almost tangible. Lauren cried softly, feeling the emptiness next to her on the bed, and Jonathan just looked at the ceiling, with dry eyes and a racing head. I knew there was still one last piece missing. The complete truth. The origin of the collapse. And it would come in the most cruel and unexpected way possible. 2 days later, Jonathan received a call. It was from Clara, Lauren's best friend, the same one who had warned her about the party. She asked to meet him in person. They were in a discreet cafe, in the center, and the first thing he noticed when he saw her was her haggard face, like someone who had been carrying a burden for too long. Bluntly, she asked for forgiveness for everything. He said that he should have spoken sooner, that he should have been firmer, but that now he could no longer handle what he knew. Jonathan listened to her attentively, with his eyes fixed, almost without breathing. Clara then revealed what was still buried. Thomas, her lover, was married to an influential woman within the company itself. A woman who, upon discovering the betrayal, not only gathered evidence of the case, but exposed everything in an anonymous dossier with a wealth of details. But it didn't stop there. This woman, when cross-checking information, identified Lauren and, in a calculated move, looked for Jonathan. Yes, she looked for him herself. Yes, she designed everything herself so that he would have access to the complete content, so that it would be the final piece of the plan. Jonathan's eyes widened, confused. He had never met Thomas's wife, only exchanged messages and received documents. But Clara corrected him, she was not his legal wife. It was the ex-wife, who had discovered that Thomas had affairs with other women during their marriage, and upon realizing the new involvement, decided to act out of revenge. She used his surname and posed as his wife. All the communication Jonathan believed to be with the current one was with someone who was no longer officially part of Thomas's life. The silence between the two lasted long seconds. Jonathan felt manipulated, used. Not for Lauren that time, but for a stranger who took revenge through him. Clara, however, continued. Said there was more. Lauren knew. I knew Thomas was married. I knew there were risks. And yet, he decided to follow. She knew how far it could go, but she trusted that the company's loyalty would protect her. And for a while, it protected. Until she was abandoned. Like all the others before. The last straw was discovering that Thomas was already involved with another employee, a young woman from HR, even before he was fired. The same one that now occupied the room that used to be Lauren's. Jonathan was in shock. The entire structure he had built, even in pain, now revealed itself to be based on a half-truth. He had been a piece in a larger game, led by a wounded woman who used her suffering as a weapon of attack. He felt silent disgust, immense tiredness. He thanked Clara, got up, left the cafe without looking back. On the way back home, he drove aimlessly for almost an hour. When he finally parked, he stayed in the car for long minutes, trying to understand everything, trying to find some logic in the chaos. When he arrived home, he found Lauren on the porch, with her eyes downcast, as if she was waiting for something. And waited. She had found out. I had received a message from the same woman, now revealing the game, the manipulation, the silent revenge. Lauren was shattered. He knew he had made a mistake, but now he realized that he had also been used, exposed, discarded like a minor piece in a war that wasn't even his. When she saw Jonathan approach, she tried to speak, but he raised his hand softly. He said he knew everything. That now everything made sense. And that there was nothing more to be said. She insisted. She said she never wanted things to get to that point, that she was sorry, that she loved him. But Jonathan didn't respond. He walked to his room, closed the door, and began to pack his bags. Only separated the essentials. Left the rest. When he left, he stopped at the door of Emily's room, entered slowly, kissed his daughter's forehead and whispered something that only she heard. As he passed Lauren, there were no words exchanged. Just one last look. And in it, there was everything, love, hurt, disappointment, but also relief. The next day, Lauren woke up alone. The house was silent. The bed is cold. Life, devastated. Jonathan left no letters. He left no explanation. He left the truth, spread in the empty spaces of the house. And he also left something else. A new version of himself. A man who chose to leave not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. And with that, he gave her the worst punishment of all, the absence of regret in her departure. Lauren spent the next few days in a state that oscillated between apathy and panic. Jonathan's absence in the house changed not only the physical routine, but also the way the room breathed. It was as if the air had changed density, as if everything around was suspended in time, trapped in some kind of invisible punishment. Emily asked about her father frequently, and although Lauren tried to remain calm and give neutral answers, she felt like a fraud with every word. His daughter's eyes carried the same tenderness that Jonathan had in his eyes and, when he looked at her, he felt a guilt that burned silently. The girl, intuitive as every child is, noticed her mother's discomfort, and that's why she also began to silence herself, creating her own refuge of drawings and prolonged silences. Lauren slept poorly, ate little, got lost in her own thoughts and tried, in vain, to organize some coherent explanation for herself. I tried to revisit decisions, understand where I had gotten lost, as if logical reasoning could reduce the emotional damage. Jonathan, on the other hand, took refuge in a temporary rented apartment for a few months while he decided what he would do from now on. The space was small, discreet, but enough to offer the kind of isolation he wanted. I didn't want connections, or visits, or advice. I needed silence, but not the kind that hurts, the silence that reorganizes. I spent most of my days writing, finally returning to the book with the depth I had never been able to access before. Pain gave voice to characters who, until then, seemed generic. And in this process, without realizing it, it began to heal. The hurt hadn't gone away, but now there was something stronger than the pain, an unrelenting clarity. Not about Lauren, not about Thomas, not about the woman who used him as a pawn in her personal vendetta. The clarity that now dominated Jonathan was about himself. And that, paradoxically, freed him more than any rematch could. On a cold Saturday afternoon, he received a message from Clara. She apologized once again, saying she felt she had been part of the plot that devastated her life. Jonathan responded with a short but honest sentence, "The truth always finds a way." And he turned off his cell phone. There was no more grudge. Just observation. He then decided it was time to see Emily. She asked Lauren to take her to a nearby cafe, a neutral place, where they could talk without weight, without judgment. Lauren accepted immediately. She was emotionally exhausted, she felt that every heartbeat was accompanied by a pang of regret that could no longer be turned into action. When he arrived at the place with his daughter, he saw Jonathan sitting at the table, with 2 hot chocolates waiting. He smiled when he saw Emily running up to him, jumping into his lap with the spontaneity of someone who still saw her father as a hero. Lauren stood for a few seconds, watching the scene, and then sat down, unable to hold back her tears. Jonathan didn't hug her, but he wasn't hostile either. He maintained his politeness, but there was a clear, invisible barrier between the two. They talked about school, about the new words Emily had learned, about the toy she wanted to win. When the girl went to the bathroom accompanied by an employee, Lauren took the moment to ask if there was any chance of reconstruction. Jonathan took a deep breath and, without looking directly at her, said that sometimes, loving someone isn't enough. That there are bridges that, once burned, cannot be built again, not for lack of love, but out of respect for one's own limits. Lauren tried to argue, saying that she was a new woman, that she had learned, that the pain she carried now was greater than any punishment. Jonathan listened carefully, but didn't respond. "I just said I needed time." And time, she knew, could be final. That night, as she drove back with Emily, Lauren felt the weight of emptiness in the passenger seat. The child slept with his head resting on the glass, oblivious to his mother's emotional devastation. When he got home, he put his daughter to bed, covered her gently and watched her for long minutes. Then he went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the mirror. He no longer recognized his own image. The woman who used to dress confidently, who spoke firmly, was now a broken reflection of poorly thought-out decisions. But what haunted her most was not the loss of status, nor the scandal, nor the dismissal. It was having lost the only look that made her feel truly seen. Jonathan looked at her as if she were whole. And now, for the first time, she felt that she might never be whole again. On the other side, Jonathan began to experience small new beginnings. On one of those cloudy afternoons, he met someone unexpectedly. She was a barista at the cafe I frequented to write. He had a simple manner, a calm smile, and eyes that demanded nothing more than presence. They started exchanging small conversations, comments about the books he was reading, about the cloudy days, about the music playing in the background. It wasn't passion. Not yet. But it was a silent relief, a break from the grief. She didn't know his history, and that was comforting. Jonathan didn't need to be the betrayed one, the abandoned husband, the strong man who rebuilt himself. It could just be him, with his discreet wounds and his respected silences. Over time, they started to meet outside the cafe. Long walks through the park, conversations that started with trivialities and ended in deep memories. Jonathan didn't talk about Lauren. And she didn't ask. They just existed, side by side, without rushing. Meanwhile, Lauren tried to reorganize her life. She sought therapy, not for Jonathan, but for herself. She began to face her own ghosts, to understand why she needed external validation so much, why she allowed the desire to feel alive to surpass such essential limits. She began to see Jonathan as someone she didn't deserve to lose, but also as a painful mirror of her own flaws. He tried to write a letter, but gave up. Nothing seemed enough. He started looking for jobs in different areas, far from corporate marketing, as if reinventing himself professionally was a way to redeem himself. But each attempt was marked by curious looks, forced smiles, and that name that now carried a known history. She was the woman who had been fired. The woman who lost her husband. The woman who... Lauren started to walk with her head down. But deep down, he knew that this was the consequence of his own steps. A month later, Jonathan showed up at school to pick up Emily. Lauren, who was at the gate, was surprised. It wasn't his day. He explained that he wanted a special afternoon with his daughter, and she agreed. When Emily ran up to him, Lauren noticed something different. There was a lightness in his eyes. It wasn't about another woman. It was about himself. Jonathan had started breathing on his own again. And that hurt more than any words. When he said goodbye, he just said that he was happy to see that she was taking care of her daughter. Lauren thanked her, but stood there, watching them walk away, trying to understand at what point she had become a spectator of her own story. Time passed and, with it, the inevitable silent reconstruction. Jonathan didn't come home, but he came back to you. And Lauren, little by little, understood that certain losses cannot be repaired, they are respected. The dilemma was now hers. Living like someone waiting for a new chance or accepting that, sometimes, the love of life is also the hardest lesson you learn. Because loving someone isn't enough when you destroy trust. And forgiveness, when it arrives, is not always accompanied by a return. Sometimes it's just the endpoint that allows you both to go in opposite directions, but ultimately free. And at that point, even though they were apart, something in both of them began to blossom again. Because even the end, when accepted maturely, can be the beginning of something more honest. More whole. And maybe, more true. Life went on, as it always does, even after entire structures collapsed. Jonathan finally sold the house where he lived for so many years with Lauren. I didn't want to keep memories on walls that witnessed silences, absences and swallowed goodbyes. The house was put up for sale discreetly, and in less than 2 months there were new owners walking on the same floor, oblivious to the story that had ended there. He moved with Emily to a new apartment closer to the park where they used to walk, simpler but full of meaning. A place where starting over was not just a metaphor, but a real and painful process. He chose to have joint custody, but little by little his daughter began to prefer weekends with him. Not out of contempt for his mother, but because there, in that new house, the silence was light, not dense. It was a home built without pretense, where peace was not decorative, but legitimate. He, who no longer knew if he believed in happy endings, began to realize that perhaps happiness was not in the end, but in the way one chooses to continue after the fall. The relationship with the barista, called Sophia, evolved in a way that was as natural as it was unexpected. She never tried to fill a void, nor did she force intimacy. Jonathan found something rare in her presence. She listened attentively, looked truthfully, and, unlike anything he had known before, she was not in a hurry. Emily liked her, not with the impulsive excitement of a child, but with a silent confidence, like someone who feels that there is a safe space there. Sophia didn't try to be a stepmother, nor a forced friend, she was just present. And so, without fanfare, it became part of the routine. There was no official dating request, there were no promises. Just two adults, survivors of their own scars, who decided to walk together. One day at a time. Lauren, in turn, continued to try to get back on her feet. He moved to another city, accepted a lower position than he had previously had, in a smaller company, where no one yet knew his past. He dyed his hair, changed his style, tried to reinvent himself on the outside, as if a new appearance could hide the internal rubble. But inside her there was something that wouldn't disappear, the awareness of what she lost. Not just marriage or stability, but the chance to be better with someone who was so loyal. He tried new relationships, some lasted weeks, others just days. But in all of them, I missed the depth that Jonathan offered with his gaze, the calmness he carried in his words, the way he knew how to silence without cutting, welcome without suffocating. No one else looked at her like he did. And the cruelest thing about it was knowing that no one would ever look again. Thomas didn't just lose his job. He also lost his real wife, who filed a divorce with severe clauses. The young woman from HR, who he thought about leaving Lauren for, quickly discovered the type of man she was dealing with and pushed him away permanently. He, who always found himself admired wherever he went, began to notice his own name becoming synonymous with warning among new employees. He ended up in a country town, where he accepted a smaller position further away from the spotlight. Today he lives in a small apartment, with a tarnished resume and a reputation that precedes him. But what hurts him most is knowing that he lost everything because of games he started himself, and that he never had control over. Clara, the friend who revealed everything, moved away from Lauren. The weight of truth, even though it is liberating, also takes its toll. She felt that her role was necessary, but that she had crossed a line that made any bond with her former friend unsustainable. Today, he lives in another city, with a new social circle, and works as a therapist. Ironically, it helps other people rebuild their lives after emotional trauma. Sometimes, in sessions, you find yourself telling parts of that story as an example, always omitting names, but offering the experience of someone who saw everything up close. And it always ends with the same sentence: no one destroys a relationship alone, but there are choices that kill what the other tried to keep alive until the end. Emily, who was just a child in the middle of everything, grew up with emotionally available, even separated, parents. Jonathan never spoke badly about Lauren in front of her, never used his daughter as a shield. And Lauren, even though she was hurt, respected the limits and tried to stay present as best as she could. Years later, in a school presentation, Emily wrote an essay called, "My House Has Two Hearts," and described, with surprising delicacy, how she learned that love can continue to exist even when paths change. Jonathan, reading that text, cried for the first time since the end of his marriage. Not out of pain, but out of pride. Because despite everything, she had managed to make her daughter not bear the burden of the war that broke out between her parents. One day, Lauren went to visit the school to pick up Emily. Jonathan was there too. It was the graduation of the last year of elementary school, and all parents were invited. She saw him from afar, smiling, holding hands with Sophia. She tried to look away, but he noticed. He walked towards her, with a lightness that seemed impossible years before. The two hugged briefly. She asked if everything was okay, and he just answered yes, sincerely. There was no tension. There was no bitterness. Just two people who, for some time, shared the same world and now lived in different orbits. Lauren returned home alone that night, but in peace. Not because I had overcome it, but because I had finally accepted it. Jonathan, upon arriving at his new home, lay down on the sofa with Sophia by his side. Emily sat on the floor, putting on an old movie for them to watch together. He looked at the ceiling for a few seconds and felt, for the first time in a long time, that this was where he was supposed to be. There was no more weight. There were no more holes. There was presence. There was peace. There was life. And so, between losses and reconstructions, between truths revealed and silences respected, history found its end. An end that was not written in reconciliation, but in emotional justice. Because sometimes, the biggest victory is leaving a place where you were no longer seen. And find, in another corner, someone who sees you as a whole, even with all the cracks. If you've made it this far, I want to invite you to comment on what you thought of this story. What would you do in Jonathan's place? Do you think Lauren deserved a second chance? Your opinion is very important. Take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive more stories like this. Here, we always remember, this channel does not support any type of betrayal. The stories are fictional and serve to show how much this type of attitude can destroy lives. Until the next story.